Hey guys, Steven here from Trace Evidence, and this is the 100,000 downloads Q&A session. I'm here in my recording studio, or technically the other room in my house where I record, and I'm going to be answering the questions that you sent in to celebrate 100,000 downloads. Before we get into the questions, I just want to thank you guys for all of your support over the months that the podcast has been out. It wouldn't be anywhere without you guys, so without you, this would be sort of pointless. It's the listeners that make the podcast what it is. I record episodes, I talk about cases, anybody can do that. But without you guys, it would just be me talking into an empty microphone. So thanks again for all of your support, and let's get right into your questions. I'm going to read through these in the order that they were received, so if it's a little disjointed, maybe in future Q&As, I can adjust the method by which I read these. But for now, let's get into it. Question number 1 comes from Maria in Pennsylvania. She sent her question in via Twitter, and she asks, what frustrates you the most about podcasting? That's a tough question to answer. There's a lot of things that are frustrating depending on what day of the week it is and how long I've been working on it. Some days it's the research. Some days I cannot find the information I need, or I have found so much information but I don't know which information is accurate or correct, so I have to do a lot of backtracking on that and find a lot of sources to verify things. But for the most part, I think the thing that's the most frustrating to me about podcasting is the audio recording. You would think it's simple to sit down and read out loud into a microphone, but it's really not. There are days where it takes me 3 hours to record 15 minutes, and there's days where I record an hour and a half in 3 hours. It really all depends how I'm working that day. You know, I write out scripts, I read off of those. Some days the lines are very easy to read, and some days you just can't get through them. I've certainly had days where I have gotten stuck on a single sentence or a single block of text, and I just can't make it work. And a lot of times I'll edit as I'm going along, and I certainly improvise as I'm reading. There's definitely times where I remove a line in the middle of my read, or I add a line in the middle of my read, but I think the audio part of it is the most frustrating, getting everything right, getting your levels correct, because you could read it perfectly, but if your microphone wasn't set properly, or if it wasn't pointing the right way, or your equalizer was a little off, it's going to sound bad, and then you got to redo it again. So it's a learning experience, and it's something I'm starting to get better at, but in the beginning, I probably spent 2 or 3 days just trying to get my audio levels to the place where they were right, and everything sounded good. Alright, so on to question number 2. This one comes from Mikki in Michigan, and she sent her question in via Twitter, and she asks, if you could witness any crime event of the past or present and get all of your questions answered, what would it be? That's a really tough question to answer. There's a lot of crime events that I'd be fascinated to see what actually happened there. Even in the events that we believe are solved, I'm sure there are questions that no one asked or things that we weren't sure that happened. The exact details of it can be confusing. My initial thought on this was I wanted to say the JFK assassination. I wanted to be there and see that. But the more I think about it, if I'm just there as a witness, it's going to be really hard to find a place in the JFK assassination to be where you're actually going to see what happened. I know the official story, and a lot of people believe it, the Lee Harvey Oswald School Book Depository. I personally fall into the camp that I think a little bit more was going on there than what we've been told. So I guess I would want to be maybe that guy up on the grassy knoll taking a look, seeing what's going on over there down by the sewers and seeing if there actually was another shooter down there. But the JFK assassination is one of those super confusing ones, and one that everyone's looked at from every possible angle, and I think ultimately at the end of the day we pretty much know what we've been told isn't exactly what happened. So I might change this, and if I had to witness one that I think is fascinating and where we don't exactly know what happened, it would be the assassination of his brother, Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy was personally a hero to me. I wasn't around when he was alive, but I've read a lot of his quotes, I've listened to a lot of his speeches, I've read books on him. I actually, in winter, I wear a coat that's got an election button of him on it. I think he was a great proponent of peace and equality, and I think it's a tragedy what happened to him. And if you look into his assassination, there are a lot of questions there that have never been answered, and it's even more frustrating because you can't really look back into it. The LAPD destroyed their files on it when they moved to their new building, so a lot of information has been lost. So to be able to be there that day and see exactly what happened, I think would answer a lot of questions for me. But in all honesty, there are so many things I would love to see how they happen so that I could answer my questions. That's almost an impossible question to answer. But yeah, I'll go with Bobby Kennedy's assassination for now. Alright, I know that last question was a little long-winded in my answer, but now we're moving on to question number 3. It comes from Lewis, from Louisville, Kentucky, on Twitter, and his question is, what made you want to get into podcasting? I've been a writer for most of my life. I've written articles, I've written web pages, I've blogs, I've written tons of stuff, and I've always been a fan of true crime. I think what really made me want to get into it was a lot of the podcasts that I was listening to before I started doing it. I was listening to podcasts like The Vanished, The Trail Went Cold, Up and Vanished, plenty of others, Last Podcast on the Left. And I just thought, here are these people, they're interested in this stuff, they're out there, they're recording it, they're talking about it, and other people are fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by it. So I thought that's great, and I enjoy it, but every single show I listened to had one detail or two details where I thought, well, I would do it this way, or I would do it that way. So I ultimately decided, well, rather than thinking to myself that I would do it that way, why don't I just try to do it that way? So I made the decision, all right, let's try this, let's write a script, let's see what happens. So I wrote a script, I read it out loud to myself, I had no equipment, no recording, nothing, it was just to see how it would go. And I tested it on a couple of friends, and I'm always talking about true crime with them anyway, driving them crazy with how many stories of it I have. So I just thought, well, let me lay this down on audio. I did, I played it for a couple of people, they liked it, and they said it could go somewhere. So I said, you know what, there's no time better than the present to try it. So I went out and I bought a little microphone, and I bought an equalizer, and I bought a mixer, and I just hooked everything up and hooked it up to my computer and said, what the hell. Since then, things have changed a little bit. I've upgraded my equipment a couple of times. I've had some microphone issues, I've had some mixer issues, but ultimately it was the podcast that I was listening to that inspired me. It was other people doing what I wanted to do. Alright, so on to the next question. Jennifer from Texas messaged me via Facebook and asked, I know you're interested in mysteries and unsolved cases. What case drew you in and has stuck with you the most? That's almost an impossible question to answer too. There's two that immediately come to mind for me. The JFK assassination and the Zodiac Killer. Those were two cases that even as a child I was fascinated by. I was constantly reading about them, constantly looking into them. Yeah, I was a strange child. When we went to the library as kids, most kids went over to the children's section. I went into the adult section. I was reading nonfiction back then. That's what always has drawn me in. So I think honestly, the JFK assassination drew me in and taught me that things don't necessarily happen the way that you're told that they happen. The Zodiac Killer case showed me that there's really twisted people out there who can do crazy things, and that they can give you a million clues, and there could be a million instances where you might be able to catch them, and it just doesn't happen for one reason or another. And I think that's what ultimately pulled me in. It was the mystery of the Zodiac Killer. To look at him, to look at what happened, and to go, God, they almost ran into him, in San Francisco when he killed the cab driver. He wrote all these letters, and there's DNA on them, and there's fingerprints on them, but they can't match it to anybody. So many things there that could have happened. And actually, if you've ever seen the movie Zodiac, I wouldn't say it's factually that accurate. It's based on Robert Graysmith's books, which have been questioned over the years as to how accurate they are. But there's a commentary track on there that's done by an author, the producer, and the script writer. And they talk about Zodiac in this really fascinating way. A lot of people look at Zodiac and think, wow, this guy was a genius to have gotten away with the stuff he did. They took a different approach. To them it was, this was a lucky guy. He should have been caught a million times, but he lucked out. Police made mistakes, or they just missed him by a second. And I think that's something that really opened my eyes, and I went, you know what, they're right. This guy wasn't sitting in like a basement somewhere planning all this stuff out with a map of California and thinking this is exactly what I'm going to do. He got real lucky. And when it comes to the podcast, and it comes to missing persons cases, and it comes to murders, yeah, somebody can get lucky and get away with it, but then you might be able to get lucky and break something open or reveal something that answers all the questions that we've ever had about it. So I think that's how they connect back to each other. But yeah, it was definitely the Zodiac case and JFK that got me drawn to true crime as a child. Okay, so Amy via Facebook asked me, what is your background as far as a career? Law enforcement, investigator, something totally different? I would fall into the category of something totally different. I have considered a career in law enforcement, and in January, I may actually be taking law enforcement training and going into a career in law enforcement. But it's something that I've debated with myself a lot. I'm very obsessive over these cases, and that's why I do the podcast. I'm drawn to this stuff. But at the same time, I think if I was firsthand involved with them, it might drive me crazy. I can't imagine the frustration of knowing someone's guilty and not being able to prove it, or watching a deal get made, or watching them walk away, or to have a crime where I don't know who did it and I can't solve it. And it's a very different thing to do a podcast. When I'm talking about an unsolved case, yes, I'm thinking about the families. Yes, I'm thinking about the victims. Yes, that bothers me. But to be a police officer and to have to look them in the eyes and say, I just don't know, I don't know how I could do that. I mean, I'd be able to, but I think it would stick with me and it would haunt me. And I don't know that I could separate my personal life from my career at that point. Right now, I actually work in retail management. It's nothing connected to what I do on the podcast. I've always been fascinated by the possibility of being a police officer or psychology. I actually went to college and I pursued a degree in psychology, which I ended up changing to history later on. But yeah, so my career really doesn't tie into the podcast at all. However, I do work close with a lot of police and ex-police in my career, so they've definitely discussed some of these cases with me, given me their thoughts and theories. I have some connections to law enforcement, and I've had several of them really urging me forward to go into law enforcement. They think I have a mind for it. Whether or not I do have a mind for it, whether or not I do go into it, that remains to be seen. Melanie from Wichita, Kansas writes in with an email and asks, how long does it take you to do an episode? Writing, editing, recording, etc. Alright, so when I start an episode, the first thing I do, I have a list of possible cases. So the first thing I do is I choose one. I go online and I immediately start gathering research. So I gather websites about the case, I gather newspaper articles, I go to, if there is a website based on the case, a place where I can contact people connected with it, and I just gather as much information as I possibly can. Once I have all my information gathered up, it's more a process of sitting there and connecting the dots. You'll find contradictory information, you'll find information that links to other things and then leads you to other places that you didn't think to go before. So it's really, I have to dig through all that for a while. By the time I get to the point where I'm going to sit down and actually record, or sit down and actually write, I should say, it's probably been a few days since I've gathered all the research and just read and read and read on it as much as I could. The writing can take anywhere between 10 to 15 hours, I would say, because some of these cases I've written 10 pages on, and some of these cases I've written 25 pages on. It depends what's out there and how much information I have access to. So on the average, I would say probably 8 hours to write the scripts for the episode. Once the scripts are written, I have to go through them and check for errors for a while. And then when it comes to recording, that can be a really long process. I have recorded as short as 4 hours and as long as 8. So that all depends on length of episode. In a general average length of an hour episode, I would say 5 hours is about my recording time. So you figure 5 hours plus 8 on top of the writing, you're looking at 13 hours right there. Then I have to edit it, which can take an hour or two. After I finish editing, then I have to upload it, I gotta write summaries of it, I have to update the website, and then I have to start setting up all the stuff to launch the episode. I would say in total, one episode probably takes me 15 to 20 hours, depending on length. Alright, so I got an email from Mark from Orlando, Florida, who asks, what case has been the most frustrating for you to cover? There's been a couple of them that have been frustrating, but I would have to say the Suzanne Joven case was very frustrating for multiple reasons. One is that there was so much police error in that investigation, and rather than take a look at the errors that they made and work to correct them, they've really only worked harder to conceal them. It's almost impossible to get your hands on information from that case. The case is passed back and forth between the New Haven police and the state police, so it's really hard. You can file FOIA requests if you want. They're not going to give you anything. It's an open investigation. They really don't want to talk about it. That case was really frustrating, and just the fact that I couldn't wrap my head around how these investigators, with all these years of experience, were able to choose a single suspect, decide it was him, and ignore all other evidence that pointed in any other direction. That was a really frustrating case for me to work on. The next question comes from Louis in Melbourne, Australia. He contacted me via email and he asked, are you planning to cover an Australian or an international case? Well, in episode 8, I covered the Bible John murders, which took place in Scotland, and actually the most recent episode that I released this week, episode 14, was the Beaumont children disappearance, which took place in Australia. I do plan to cover more international cases. But at the same time, I grew up in the United States, so a lot of the cases that I know or have a good knowledge of firsthand are cases that took place here. However, I don't want to dismiss other countries, and I definitely want to cover cases. There's fascinating cases from all around the world. But when I'm trying to get ahead of the 8 ball and I'm trying to get more than one episode done in a week, it's sometimes easier for me to focus on ones I know a little bit more about or that I've heard about for most of my life. But I definitely have a list of cases that you wouldn't believe, and a lot of them take place in other countries. My next question comes from Angela in San Diego, California, and she contacted me via email, and she asks, are you a gamer? Yeah, I'm somewhat of a gamer. I'm not what you would define as a gamer. I'm certainly not somebody who plays games 8 to 10 hours a day. I don't have the time. When I was a kid, I did. I grew up in the era of the original Nintendo. I played that constantly as a child. Now, I have a PlayStation 4 and I have an Xbox One. If I get to play for about 2 hours a week, I'm lucky. So I enjoy it. It's a nice relaxing thing. I like to pop in a game that really doesn't take a ton of thought just so that I can mindlessly zone out on it. I recently purchased a Nintendo Switch, so now when I'm traveling or when I'm at work and I'm on my break, I can pull that out and play for a little while. But honestly, most of my free time these days is spent researching cases and looking into things related to the podcast. So as much as I would love to be a gamer, I don't have the time to do it. This next question kind of ties into the previous one. Mikki contacts me via Facebook and asks, after a long day of researching crime, what do you do to clear your head? I wish that I could say there was some specific activity that I did to clear my head, but there really isn't. Most of the time, after a long day of researching crime, I spend a long night researching crime. There's not a whole lot of break time in there. I record typically between Thursday and Saturday, so a lot of times I'll give myself a day on the weekend off. I'll take a Sunday and just relax. But if I'm just relaxing, I'm probably reading a book or I'm probably just watching TV. Random movies. I watch a lot of television shows like Game of Thrones I'm fascinated by, so especially now that we're in the middle of that and it's almost the end of season 7. Things like that I'll do to clear my head. But for the most part, if I've got the free time, I have to devote it to trying to look into something for the podcast because it's a constant race to get ahead. You don't want to fall behind. I don't want a week to come where it's like, oh my god, I have to release an episode and I've got nothing. So I'm always trying to get ahead on that. So Luke from North Carolina contacts me via email and asks, are there any crimes that have been solved that you're interested in or which you doubt the answer to? Yes, there's quite a few crimes that have been solved that I doubt the answer to. JFK is a good one, RFK is a good one, Martin Luther King. These all kind of border on that conspiracy side of things, and I try not to go into that too much on the podcast. I am interested in those cases, and they are cases that I would like to look into at some point in time, but I've yet to figure out the balance of how I could approach them specifically as true crime cases. I think it's something that I've decided is going to be Patreon exclusive. I'm going to probably do some of those cases, the ones that really fascinated me as a child, but they're going to be exclusive to the Patreon, at least for a while. Maybe after a year or so I would release them as bonus episodes, or I'll release previews of them or something. But cases like JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, Zodiac Killer, Kurt Cobain, all those cases, regardless of what I think about them, I'll approach them the same ways I do everything else. Here's the evidence, here's what I think is likely, here's what I think is less likely. The only difference is that those cases have been solved. So to look at them and to ignore that solving and to just say, here's all the evidence, I think that would be fascinating to do. Alright, so Cassie from North Dakota contacted me via Twitter and asks, what kind of music do you listen to? I listen to almost everything. If I pulled out my iPod right now and showed it to you, you would find everything on there from Johnny Cash to Dr. Dre to Lady Gaga to Phil Collins to Metallica. Everything is on there. I think the only thing I don't listen to really is opera. I don't really have any opera on there, but I love all genres of music, and I judge music differently. It's not, oh, I'm a metalhead, so I have to listen to metal, or I like rap, so it has to be rap. To me, if a song speaks to me, and a song has emotion, and a song makes me feel something, then I'm going to like it regardless of who the artist is and what genre they come from. Okay, so Marcia from New York contacted me via email, and she asked, what recording equipment do you use? Well, things changed since the beginning. When I began, I had just a condenser microphone that wasn't that great, hooked up to a Behringer Xenix 802 mixing board, and that was about all that I had. At this particular point in time, I have an Audio-Technica AT2020 microphone, which is hooked into a Mackie Pro FX8 mixer, and that's hooked into a MacBook where I use GarageBand to record my audio. A lot of people have told me to try Audacity, and I've taken a look at it, and I have some experience with Audacity, but I'm comfortable with GarageBand right now. It's a very easy process to use. Maybe in the future, when I start looking more into amping up my audio and making it seem better, that might be something I would change. But for now, I think the equipment I'm using is working just fine. Sarah asked me via Facebook, what case got you into true crime and what case haunts you? I sort of answered this earlier, but I didn't really answer the cases that haunt me so much. There's a few cases that really haunt me. Episode 11, I believe it was, when I did A Should Agree, that case haunts me. Just the idea that someone that young could disappear in such a strange way and nobody can figure out what happened there. And then you've got the details about her backpack being found in the double garbage bags. None of it makes sense to me. There's a lot of questions there that need answers, and I don't know that we're ever going to get them. But that case really does haunt me a lot. If I go back to my childhood, the one case that I think of that haunted me the most and scared me the most as a child was the Adam Walsh case. John Walsh's father went on to start America's Most Wanted. That's a really disturbing case to read about. That was a case that we used as like a boogeyman story when I was a kid. That's why you don't go off with strangers. That's why you don't walk away from your parents in the store. That case has always haunted me, and I think it's had a dynamic impact on my life and changed the way that I approach situations and people. Casey asks via Facebook, what case do you think the investigators got the most wrong on and why? In the cases that I've covered specifically, Suzanne Joven comes to mind. That's a perfect example of how not to run an investigation from a police standpoint. They chose a suspect, and they tried to make all the evidence fit him rather than letting the evidence fit whoever the suspect could have turned out to be. A lot of times with investigators, they decide what the answer is, and they're not going to allow anything to change their mind. It's weird. I've had debates with people about this. There's almost this mentality of they can't admit to being wrong because then people will lose faith in them. That's the argument that's given to me a lot. And I feel like because they don't admit that they're wrong, I lose faith in them. You have to be willing to say, look, we messed this up, it's our fault, and we're going to work to fix it. But that doesn't usually happen. Usually they stick to their guns on something, and unless you can prove them wrong, they're never going to admit that they made a mistake on it. The Suzanne Joven case to me is a case that easily should have been solved. I don't know how you can have forensic evidence on the victim and you don't process it for years. That is just disgusting to me. The steps that the New Haven police took to investigate that disturbed me, and the way that they decided Wanda Velde was the person responsible without any evidence and nothing linking him to it. I have no idea what was going on there. Maybe it was a grudge against Wanda Velde, but something very strange happened there. The next question comes from Logan. He emailed me. He's in Alaska, and he asks, do any other podcasts inspire you? Yes, they do. I mentioned a couple earlier. The Vanished was a big inspiration to me, and I've talked to Marissa a couple times. She's an amazing person. I don't know how she does what she does with all the responsibilities that she has in her life. I don't have nearly as many responsibilities. I don't have children, and I find it hard to squeeze in the time on this, so kudos to her. I don't know how she does it, but she has a great podcast. I really enjoy it. Another would be The Trail Went Cold. I haven't personally spoken to Robin, but I really enjoy the work that he does on that show. It's very well produced, and he's able to take those cases that I grew up with, the ones that were on Unsolved Mysteries, for instance, and he's able to research them deeper and give me more information about them. So it's this weird twist of nostalgia with updates. I absolutely love that show. In terms of Up and Vanished, I think that's a really well-produced show. I listened to it for most of its run. I haven't finished it. I didn't listen to the last 2 episodes, I suppose it is, like the Q&A and then the trivia or whatever it was. David contacted me via Facebook. He's in Delaware, and he asks, is there any case you've uploaded so far or plan to upload in the future that involves someone you knew personally? No, I don't think so. I don't think I would want to do a case that I have a personal connection to. It would be very, very difficult for me to remain unbiased in a case that I have a personal connection to. And that's a big thing for me on the show, is remaining as unbiased as I could. Now, if it was a case that took place somewhere I lived, or it was a case that involved an area that I'd been to, or people that I had known in the past, that's possible. But if, if my good friend's mother was murdered, I don't think I'd want to cover that. And if someone very close to me disappeared, I would try and get that information out there. But to dig into the details of something like that is that close to you, I think would be psychologically very trying, and it would be almost impossible to not decide what I think happened and try and push that agenda. So I don't think I'll do any personal cases. Lana contacts me via Facebook and asks, how do you go about your research? Where do you start? The internet is a vast black hole of information. How do you sort through the noise and find the worthwhile facts and theories? That can be really challenging. Research is an important aspect of the show. I would probably say it's more important than the actual recording of the show, because if you don't have the information right, your show's not going to make any sense. And to me, it's about giving you as much information as I can find, because I want you to know everything there is to know about this case so that you can decide for yourself what you think happened. So I usually start online and I go to news articles. You just read a lot of news articles. You got to compare news articles to other ones. You're going to find contradictory information. That's just the way it is. I remember when I was doing a Lauren Spear case, there were 2 completely different timelines floating out there. I have no idea how that's possible. The police released one, the newspaper released another. I don't know which one's the accurate one, but I figured the police was most likely the most accurate one. So yeah, it's a lot of reading online. After that, if you want to go above and beyond that, if you have time, you can file FOIA, or Freedom of Information Act requests regarding cases, trying to get police files on it. Some of those cases have those requests filed on them, and you can find the case files online. Beyond that, you want to try and talk to family and friends about the case. So it's really just a matter of gathering as much information as you can, putting it all together, and then taking an Occam's razor approach and what is most likely to have happened here. So yeah, you may find 5 different descriptions of exactly how something happened. Sometimes when I do the episode, I'm going to give you those 5 descriptions. Other times I'm going to give you the one that seems to make the most sense, or it's kind of a conglomeration of all of them. Or I'll give you one and then I'll say some people say this, some people say that. But that's really all that you can do. You just have to have an eye for it, you have to pay attention, and you have to decide what's logical and what most likely happened here. The next question comes from Tabitha. She contacts me via Facebook, and if you don't know Tabitha, she's one of my admins on the discussion group, so give her a shout out if you see her on there. She asks, how do you pick the cases you choose with so many out there? There's no specific method by which I do that. I constantly look up cases. If I think they could be interesting or I think they could fit the format of the show, I jot down the names involved with the case. Then later, when I'm doing my research, I start going through that, and a case will jump out at me. It's really strange the way it works. Probably every episode I've done so far was considered to be a different episode at some point in time. There are times where I decide an episode's going to be my number 3, and then it becomes number 8. Or I decide it's going to be episode 10, and it's number 5. It all depends what is speaking to me that week, what information is available, and sometimes I'll look and see what's got more recent updates linked to it. The Lauren Spear case was an interesting one because they had the recent developments with the Hannah Wilson murder and the possible connections to Lauren. So yeah, it's more or less a matter of right place, right time, what case feels right today. And also, although I broke this pattern with episodes 13 and 14, I typically, if you pay attention to the show, go murder, disappearance, murder, disappearance. I try and alternate and give you a different one each week, so that plays a factor in it as well. Donna from Georgia emails me and asks, what's been the most eye-opening case you've covered so far? That's really hard to answer. I think they've all opened my eyes in one way or another. Suzanne Jovin's case opened me to how many mistakes police can make in an investigation and how negatively that can impact it. The Aisha Degree case opened me to just how something can happen against all logic and not make any sense, and yet you're stuck there trying to figure it out. I think every case opens my eyes in one way or another. But ultimately, it's sort of sad, but every case in a way just reminds me of the world we live in and that it's not safe. There are people out there who want to do terrible things to people for no other reason than that they enjoy doing it. The Arliss Perry case was fascinating. The poor woman went to a church after an argument with her husband and she ended up murdered for it. There's no reason for it. There's nothing that makes sense there. And this world doesn't make sense and it's not fair. So I think every time I do another case, I'm a little bit more jaded by the world that I live in. But there's also so many good people in it, it's hard to balance out. But yeah, I think all the cases opened my eyes up and just, I'm a lot more vigilant than I was previously, and I was already pretty vigilant, but suffice it to say, since I've started doing the podcast, I've added a lock or 2 to my doors. So, the next question comes from Rose. She's from Australia, and she contacted me via Facebook, and she asks, with 87,000 words typed, do you touch type or type with just 2 fingers? I actually do like a hybrid of typing. I don't particularly like touch type. They tried to teach it to me in school when I was young, but it never worked for me. But I'm also not a 2-finger typer. I'm like a 6-finger typer. I predominantly use my index, middle fingers, and thumbs when I'm typing. I type 87 words per minute. It works for me. It's fast. The touch type thing, the constant positioning of your hands in that way makes my wrists hurt, whereas with the way that I type, my hands, I'm moving like this when I'm typing. So that's just more comfortable for me. It keeps my arms moving, it keeps my wrists moving, I don't get stiffness, and I'm able to type for a lot longer period of times like that. The next question comes from Jessica. She's in Gothenburg, Sweden, and she asks, what's your opinion on polygraph testing? Is there a case outside of the US that fascinates you? So sort of a dual question here. My opinion on polygraph testing is that it is almost completely useless, and the only point of polygraph testing is to ask somebody if they'll do it and see if they actually will, to give you an indication of whether or not they have something to hide. Beyond that, polygraphs are useless. If you are accused of a crime and you agree to take a polygraph test, you're a fool. Because if you pass it, it's inadmissible in court and nobody cares. And if you fail it, it's still inadmissible in court, but now the public's going to think you're guilty because the newspaper's going to print it. That's going to negatively impact the jury pool that they're drawing from. I don't think they're good. In psychology, you're taught that polygraphs are still highly debated and they're not admissible in court because they're not dependable. I'm not a big fan of polygraph tests. I think if you ask someone to take one and they say yes, they might have less to hide. But at the same time, if I did not commit a crime and you asked me to take a polygraph, I'm going to say no, because there is no benefit for me in taking that polygraph, and most lawyers are going to advise their clients not to take them also. It's funny how when you hear about a crime happening in the news report, so-and-so refused to take a polygraph, people almost immediately are like, oh, they must be guilty. No, it's basically a 50-50 chance of you passing or failing, and it's not even based on what actually happened. So, no, I have a great difficulty accepting polygraph tests. I remember I applied for a job once, and they told me that part of the hiring process was to take a polygraph test. And I remember just thinking, I'm really looking forward to this because I'm going to lie and I want to see if it catches me. I never actually got that far into it. They hired somebody else, but I thought it was going to be an interesting experiment. The next question is sort of case-specific. Wanda from Texas asked me via Facebook, can any testing be done for this fingerprints on the garbage bags that Aisha Degree's backpack was wrapped in? With one inside of the other, it should have been protected somewhat from the elements and possibly preserved. I completely agree with you there. There's probably some evidence on that bag or on the garbage bags themselves, but we don't know. The FBI took custody of the bag and the garbage bags, and they've never released any information on it. That leads me to two possible theories. Either they found something on that bag, but they've yet to match it to anybody, or they didn't find anything on that bag, and they don't want people to know. We won't know until they tell us further, but yeah, I would have to believe that by wrapping it in the garbage bags and preserving it in that way, forensic evidence was kept, but you also have to factor in if they're going through the efforts of double wrapping that bag before they bury it, it's possible that they wore gloves when they did it so they wouldn't have fingerprints on the bag, but if the bag had been in their possession, there could be fibers, hairs maybe, but yeah, I would think that there's probably some forensic evidence on the bag. Jennifer from Texas writes in and says, which case from all the cases that you've covered do you personally think is the most solvable? There's a couple that I think are the most solvable. I think the Tara Calico case is solvable. The police investigated that case pretty thoroughly. There were task force involved, and they got a lot of information that led them to specific places. The problem is they have such wide areas that they would need to do body searches for, but for the most part, internally, in the Belen, New Mexico Police Department and Sheriff's Department, they're pretty sure they know what happened in that case. They just don't have the evidence to link it there, so I think that's a solvable case. I think the Suzanne Joven case is extremely solvable. I know I've mentioned that case a couple times in this Q&A, but it's something that's been fresh on my mind lately, and it's just very frustrating. So yeah, that case is certainly solvable. You've got the DNA evidence, you've got witness descriptions of a suspect, you know what the murder weapon would be. The problem is there's been so much time, so I think short of somebody coming forward or some miraculous break in the case, you're probably not going to see a solving of that case there. I would have thought that the Arliss Perry case would have been more solvable. You have the murderer's DNA. How it never linked to anybody, I don't know. I know in the show I talked about the possibility that the guy who did it ended up dead himself, and that's why they were never able to link it to somebody. It's very strange to me that that guy's DNA never hit, because that is not a beginner crime. There's no way that guy wasn't in the system. But it was also at a time when they weren't taking DNA, so that guy could have committed crimes all around that particular point in time, and then died or stopped committing crime prior to his DNA getting into the system. I think every case is solvable to a degree. It's just to what degree are they solvable, how much information do we have, and how much dedication is there to them. I think people like you who listen to podcasts like this, you dig deeper into the cases that fascinate you. I think we're moving more into an era where, yeah, police investigate the cases, but I think going forward, you're going to see a lot more of podcast hosts or podcast listeners or TV people, just entertainment people based in the true crime world who are going to come across new evidence and new theories. And as forensic techniques get better, who knows, maybe they'll come up with something that can all bring it together and make them much easier to solve. But every case is solvable. It's just a matter of time and dedication, like anything else. Okay, so this next question is a final question, and it comes from Christie. She's in Tasmania, and she sent her question in via Facebook. I find true crime really interesting, but I often wonder whether I'd be able to cope with hearing details of crimes if a crime was committed against me or my loved ones. I.e., once I had experience of what I was hearing about, I could no longer stomach it. Obviously, I don't know your past and history, but I wonder what steps you've taken to cope with the things that you read about and share with us. You speak about anger you were feeling, and I know you do meticulous research. How do you decompress? There is no specific coping mechanism for me on this. I read the cases and I try to almost approach it like a doctor. Don't get too personally involved in this. This is the way it is. Here's some black and white facts. But that's kind of impossible to do at the same time. You're going to get personally involved. There's no two ways around that. Yes, some cases make me angry. Some cases make me sad. Some cases make me really sad. The only way I can deal with them is reminding myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing these cases because other people aren't. I'm talking about these cases because they're unsolved and because there's family members out there who don't want their loved ones to be forgotten. There's missing people out there that maybe they could be found one day. There's murderers out there who maybe they could get caught if just one extra person paid attention to them. So, yes, emotionally it can be very draining. And typically when I finish a case on a Friday or a Saturday, the rest of that day I can't look at anything true crime related. I have different ways that I cope with things. I tell a lot of jokes in my personal life. I'm one of those black humor guys. I tell a lot of dark jokes, and that's a way that I deal with it. There's that song, you know, where they say I'm the kind of guy that laughs at a funeral. That is me. I do that. That's how I deal with things. Humor is my way to deal with things. Publicly, I deal with things in that way. Personally and privately, when I am by myself, I deal with things in a very, very different way. That's when I allow my emotions to take over. It's something that really not many people in my personal life have ever seen. It's more something that I keep to myself. These cases do bother me. I've had more than a few times where I've gone to go to bed after writing a paper or writing a script and just felt like, what the hell happened here? Why don't we have answers on this? I've dealt with that more times than I can tell you, and I'll continue to deal with that in the future. So it can be difficult to cope with. As for the second half of that question on how I decompress, just relaxing. I spend time with family when I can. I spend time with my girlfriend and her kids, and I hang out with them. So a lot of times that's all you need, is to busy your mind with something else. I go to work. I allow myself to get busy in my job, and everything else just kind of fades away. I put my headphones in. I listen to music. I listen to another podcast to just take my mind off what I'm doing. I don't just listen to true crime podcasts. There is a balance there. So I do have some humor podcasts in there and some sports-related podcasts that I listen to. But it's just all about clearing your head and being able to balance everything. So if I deal with a really, really dark case, yeah, I'm probably going to turn the TV on and watch some stupid comedy rather than a really dark movie or something that's going to add to that. So, yeah, it's just a matter of knowing how to take what you're dealing with and focus it. Take that sadness and focus it on what you're doing. Boy, this case really makes me sad. I bet it makes her parents even more sad. Let's try and help them. And that's what I do. Alright guys, well I want to thank you for all the questions that you sent in. I may not have gotten to all of them, but there is going to be another Q&A coming up and I'm keeping all the questions on file. So thanks again for sending in all your questions, and thanks for listening to Trace Evidence. I am working on episode 15 right now, so that'll be out this weekend. I hope that you'll all enjoy it when it comes out and let me know what you think about it. And I just revamped the entire website yesterday at trace-evidence.com, so if you haven't had a chance to check that out, check it out now. This video is going to be launched on my Patreon first, so all Patreon subscribers are going to get early access to the Q&A video, and then it's going to come out to the rest of you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for your questions. Thanks for 100,000 downloads, and just to give you a little update, I know I was a little delayed in releasing this video, but we're actually at about 160,000 downloads now, so it's going well, and I am grateful for all of you who listen and for all of you who talk to me on Facebook and Twitter and who email me your cases and your suggestions, and I do my best to get back to all of you, and if I can't do it immediately, I will eventually. So thank you again for all of your support, and thanks for listening to Trace Evidence.